What's up, heroes, and welcome to episode 83 of the Producer Life podcast. Today's guest is Chris Robley, a singer-songwriter and award-winning poet who also happens to be one of the creative geniuses behind the marketing team at CD Baby. For more than a decade, he's edited the DIY Musician blog and has been the co-host of the DIY Musician podcast, both of which are terrific resources I strongly encourage you to check out. As a musician, he creates orchestral indie pop and folk music which has been praised by the LA Times, the Boston Globe, NPR's Second Stage, and others. His award-winning poetry has been published in Poetry Magazine, Prairie Schooner, Poetry Northwest, and more. In this episode, we talk about staying creatively inspired, when it's time to take a break, the relationship between poetry and lyrics, social media planning, and he shares some creative ideas for pre-saved campaigns. But first, cue the intro music.
This is the Producer Life podcast with your host, the House Ninja. Bringing you actionable ideas to improve your music and get it heard.
Hey, Chris, welcome to the Producer Life podcast.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
This should be a terrific interview. I'm looking forward to talking to you both about your professional life as the senior content manager at CD Baby and also your personal music career and some of the gothic indie rock that you produce.
Yeah, I am too. And there's inevitably some overlap in those two topics, I'm sure.
Yeah, you seem to, I don't know, it seems like a best of possible worlds when your professional job kind of overlaps your music career as well. And I imagine there's a lot of synergy between those two.
Yeah. I mean, the one being my own musical pursuits completely informs the more substantial W-2 income, I should say, the day job.
Well, I'm sure it's both ways. You know, you are the senior content manager. And as I was looking over what that means on your LinkedIn profile, you are responsible for articles, guides, videos, live streams, conferences. You're kind of it strikes me that you're the creative mastermind at CD Baby. I mean, you're kind of the engine that puts out all the content. Is that?
I'll take some credit for that, but yeah, we have a team and I do work fairly closely with the VP of marketing, a guy named Kevin Bruner, who is a co-host of a podcast we have together called the DIY Musician Podcast. And that sort of brand, which is an offshoot brand of CD Baby, became the DIY Musician blog, the podcast, the conference. So it has sort of spun into a whole, education for artists, but as well as a chance for artists to kind of come together themselves as a community and teach each other. So that's been really, a gratifying part of the job. I'll pat myself on the back for a lot of it, but not all of it.
Yeah. But so the podcast came first. Is that you're up to 276 episodes now?
It did. Yeah. I think we started in 2007-ish. Wow. Yeah, it's been around for a long time. And then, the blog probably followed a year or two later, but we've been doing it a long time. And I'm sure in our, however long that is, I'm sure we've said a lot of things that if I went back and listened would sound quite idiotic.
Well, I think that's true for any sort of creative endeavor. You go back and you look at some of your early work and you go, man, what was I thinking? So where does this so you're developing content for CD Baby during the day job. Then you've also got your personal music brand as well. And obviously you're putting out content for that too. How do you keep that creative wellspring going? That's a lot of stuff that you're constantly having to post about and write about and talk about.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the short answer is I don't keep it all going. And I struggle with that. Or at least I did struggle with that. I think artists have a sense that they need to constantly be producing and not just producing music, but, producing content, booking shows, just any way you can be productive. I think we just feel this pressure to always be doing it. And I was definitely that way in my musical life up until about 2011, which is when I actually moved. CD Baby is based in Portland, Oregon, and I lived there for quite a long time. And then in 2011, I moved back closer to where my parents were on the East Coast, and I had a baby, and becoming a father, I sort of went into a musically dormant mode for a few reasons. One, I'm in a new place. My band isn't near me. I'm a dad, so I don't have really time to I certainly didn't have time to be going out to clubs and finding musicians to collaborate with and stuff. But I really wasn't even finding the time to practice and book many gigs of my own because, parenting takes it's
a full-time job right there.
Full-time job. Yeah. And I was kind of, slowly getting adjusted to that thing. Oh, this will be easy. And I'm like, holy shit. That's, 1,000 people told me it'll change my life and be tons of work, but they were proven correct. And so I put music on the back burner for about 4 years and played probably just a handful of shows a year just to sort of like remember how to do it. Uh-huh. And I switched to, I kept artistic pursuits going. I sort of switched to poetry. It's way more conducive to, a domestic life. And it's a lot easier to carry a piece of paper or a laptop around than it is to move a drum set and all that. So,
yep.
So yeah, anyways, I switched gears to poetry for a little while. And then, at some point sort of had space in my life opening up again for music stuff as well as the passion returned. But anyways, that's my long-winded way of saying like, I allow myself breaks. And that was the most dramatic one. It lasted years. But, now that I'm sort of back fully into music, it still will be like burn the candle at both ends for 3 weeks and then just crash and take 2 or 3 weeks off and let myself just remember what life is like away from Instagram and my computer and whatever. And, I guess like I sort of wish I could have more regimented, like, some people are very good at time blocking and scheduling their entire life. I've never been really good at that. And whenever I try it, it seems to get scattered. But anyways, this is my own sort of more vague version of time blocking. I just leave room for not being productive.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of time blocking on a macro scale. Your 4-year break there with sort of, really actively pursuing the music portion strikes me as almost like an academic sabbatical where you take a year off every, 7 years or something?
Yeah, exactly.
So did you, when you started coming back, did you find that your musical wellspring was refreshed at that point? Would you recommend other musicians maybe do that? Take a year or two off? And
I definitely do. And I would, it's the type of thing I can say like later, feeling like now I have some hard-earned wisdom or something. If I could recommend people do it when they're feeling a certain way, that's when I would recommend it. And it's when a musician is feeling not just burned out and tired, but when they're getting to that place where they feel resentful and I think most musicians can relate to this. Like you get to a place where you're feeling kind of bitter, you look around, other musicians that maybe you think aren't as good or haven't worked as long or are going further in certain way. Anyways, bad feelings build up. And that just coincided with the time when my life changed drastically in many ways. I moved, I had a kid. And in my downtime, I also had this just beautiful experience of becoming a father, starting a new relationship, or I'd say sort of like deepening a new relationship, finding out how to co-parent, all these things that like, as deeply as I connect with music and as important and essential as music is to me, it's not the most important thing when those other things take shape in your life and you're very much responsible for, the sink or swim aspect of family, domestic life. So I just had this like really drastic shifting of my perspective. And again, this happened probably over years. So now I can say it as this thing that was easy. It wasn't, and it wasn't quick. But when I came back to music, I don't think I've felt really any of that. I still feel sometimes like tired of how sometimes difficult things feel, but I shed the comparison component of it, and I'm way less bitter and jealous or those sorts of lower things. Cause I'm like, holy shit, my life is fantastic. Like I have this beautiful girl, like my family, like just all the good stuff in life I'm way more appreciative of. And so I think that has crowded out in a very good way. Any of that negative stuff, I just don't have time and space for it. And if it starts to like nudge itself into my psychic space, like something very quickly will like boot it back out because I got to get my kid to school or whatever. So anyways, if people are feeling bitter, that's the time to take a break.
Okay. That sounds like good advice. And you kind of pursued a related field. Is that when you started writing poetry, or you've done it before?
I had written, like, in college, I was really interested in poetry and probably wrote a bunch of really terrible, pretentious things. And then around the time I was kind of burning out on music, I regained a passion for reading poetry, and writing a little bit. And it was odd. The energy that the energy and curiosity that I had always brought to music, as that was dying out, I was able to slip it into this related creative medium, and had some like pretty quick success in that field, which was weird because with music, I've had successes, but they weren't quick. And with poetry, I very quickly got a lot of things published in, pretty prestigious journals and stuff, Poetry Magazine and places like that. And it was odd. It was like, oh wow, I think I'm probably good at this because I'm inspired enough to do it, I guess. But also I'm getting acceptance in that world fairly quickly. And it was weird. And I think another thing that when I returned to music, helps me have a more healthy perspective on it. I realized that like success in poetry is just so relative. It's like the best poets in the world, or, the sort of the most quote famous poets in the world are still like completely unknown to most of the world. If they have a best-selling book, it might sell, I don't know, 20 or 30 or 40,000 copies. And, compared to what's on the New York Times bestseller list, that's nothing. So I was like, oh, that's cool that there's this whole world that of course has its own hierarchies and ambitions and stuff, but is very free of a lot of the things that I think musicians are hung up by, the sort of obsession with youth and obsession with massive amounts of attention. And I was like, oh, poetry, just by the nature of what the art is, that stuff is sort of impossible. And it gave me a little bit of a good perspective shift, I think.
How does poetry relate to or inform your songwriting now?
I don't really know. I'm absolutely sure that it does. I feel like once I had that poetry phase, I think I became a way better lyricist. But I do think of them as very different art forms. I'm not exactly sure how to summarize that, but I will say that I wrote so many poems in that poetry phase that I have gone back through them. And even though most of what's written on the page wouldn't work as a song lyric, there'll be phrases or, a few lines or even just an image or an idea that I have kind of stolen or cannibalized into a song lyric later. So, okay. It's like a good well to draw on, I guess.
What would you say are the major differences between writing a lyric and writing a poem?
Well, the tone, like the tone and musicality of a poem, or not to say poems have to sound musical, but it has to be entirely contained within how you are playing with or defying expectations of language. It exists separate from the music, and I think music is such a obviously like powerful and information-rich, emotion-rich medium that when you like put that underneath lyrics, you can get away with a lot more, I think, in lyric writing. And that might sound disparaging or lyrics can be stupid. And I don't mean that in a bad way. That I think there's a beauty in very simple, even incoherent, dumb word utterances with lyrics. And it doesn't matter, because it's coasting on this just bed of music and how they speak to each other. Anyways, poetry, at least my conception of poetry, didn't have that. It has to sort of exist in this other place.
Yeah. I think some of the best songs, I mean, it can be carried by a beautiful instrumental, but it can also be carried by a really clever verse or chorus, or, some of the most timeless songs are ones that tell a story and take the listener on a journey. And so it seems like there's a great deal of poetry that goes into good lyrical writing, but I'm not a poet, so that's why I was curious about your perspective.
Well, one thing that just occurred to me is I think what I appreciate the most about poetry isn't its, lyricalness or lack thereof. It's not necessarily about the formal structure of the words, although that stuff can be very cool. I think for me, the definition of good poetry to me is like this a concept of like rhyming or clashing ideas, and that how do I say this? That Keats had this, very famous phrase that he used called negative capability when talking about Shakespeare's writing. And it was this idea that Shakespeare was such a genius because he could put thoughts together in a way where they didn't have to like strain too much to make meaning. They just had a kind of beautiful sense of their own. And so there wasn't just a straining after having to know or have to pin down the exact literal meaning of something. So it's this sort of free space of ideas that sometimes don't even need to cohere. And I find that the most powerful thing about poetry. And to the extent that sort of thing can enter lyrics, that's where I'm always sold. I don't know how many of your listeners will be familiar with Paul Simon's stuff, but he's got this song called Train in the Distance, which the verses are very narrative, and they talk about, a husband and a wife having a kid, getting divorced. It's very like a literal story. And then the chorus just switches to this thing that's seemingly completely disconnected. And he says, everybody loves the sound of a train in the distance. Everybody thinks it's true. And that sort of juxtaposition of the narrative with this thing that feels wise, even though you don't know exactly why, just makes me cry every time I hear that song. It like has so much power. So yeah, that sort of poetic energy, if it can live in a lyric, is really what makes music for me.
Yeah. And you're also a multi-instrumentalist. You play a lot of the sounds that you're recording when you're doing your gothic indie pop. Is that, I know you have a jazz guitar background. Do you also play other instruments as well?
I do. I play keyboards and, bass. I can play sort of rudimentary mandolin, ukulele. If it's got strings, I can play it usually well enough to make a part that'll work in a recording. I wouldn't necessarily step on stage and at a jam session with those instruments, but, and, I can do some sequencing and programming of drum stuff and MIDI type stuff. I am not a good actual drummer. So if there are drum sets on my recordings, they're usually actual drummers or drum machines.
Okay. Harmonicas, is that you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I play harmonica too. Not very well, but, good enough for folk music.
Yeah. I was listening to something and I was like, it's kind of Blues Traveler-esque. So are you doing a lot of the producing technical aspects? Are you using a DAW and going in there and adding? Your vocals are really, really gorgeous. The way you've got them processed. Are you doing that, or are you hiring a producer to do that?
Well, so it depends. If they're older recordings of mine, a lot of those were actually probably done in a studio, and I would sometimes start with a kind of a drums, bass, guitar tracking basic tracks live. And then I would do much or all of the overdubbing stuff. More lately, and especially through like pandemic times, I've got Luna, the Universal Audio workstation. I've been using that to do a lot of more bedroomy or, maybe slightly more electronic tinged stuff myself. And then the point at which I stop is when it needs to be mixed. I get really intimidated by that process. So I feel confident enough throwing sounds, against the wall. And I know to some degree a good mixing engineer can even save the fact that I don't know what I'm doing as an engineer. but then I stop and I have 3 or 4 friends that are mixing engineers that I'll send stuff to, and they do the rest. I mean, with my input, but
okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So circling back a little bit, you've got at CD Baby, you've got the podcast, you've got a blog, you're publishing, or your team is publishing fairly regularly to social media. Can you talk about sort of the content strategy? I mean, do you guys, when you're planning for a big organization like CD Baby, are you guys planning days, weeks out in advance? Do you have a calendar? Is there a thought process there, or is it just kind of a brainstorming session? Oh, what are we going to say today?
Oh, that's a good question, and it's something we're sort of revamping now. For a really long time, CD Baby was, it was a small company, and we had it's at one point we had no marketing team, and then I worked in basically customer service and worked my way into a job that was called editor, which at the time was a team of people who were listening to everything that came in, which was a lot of music. And then that team sort of just by default became the marketing team. And so a lot of music business stuff I kind of learned on the go throughout my customer service phase, which, isn't really customer service, it's more artist services. Our clients that are using our services and have a lot of questions about the music business, how to book gigs, the legality of, samples and all this stuff. So I learned a lot of that on the go, and then kind of became the one of three on the marketing team and kind of had to learn marketing as I went as well. And for a really long time, what content was for CD Baby was literally whatever I wanted it to be. Like Kevin and I were the ones generating, it's probably safe to say we're generating 100% of the content. I was probably generating about 80% of it myself. And so it would be very scattershot, like, oh, I woke up this morning and had a question about doing something on Facebook. I'll write an article about that, and I'll literally do it for my own music and take screenshots. And so that was a place and a time in my life when my own musical pursuits were, very much overlapping with what CD Baby was putting out, and it was just driven by my own curiosity a lot of times, or by the questions, sort of the most common questions we were getting from the artists that are using CD Baby. And we must have gone for about 12 years like that. And now the world has changed a lot. CD Baby has more competitors. There's more just free information out there. You can find anything on YouTube. So we're shifting our strategy a bit. It's becoming more thought out in advance. It's becoming a little bit less focused on just output. I used to write 5 articles a week, and now maybe we'll do like one every other week, and that's fine. Some of the, I'd say that's the case for the blog stuff we do. Certainly our conferences are planned out, 6 to 12 months in advance. For social, we have some things that are, on the conveyor belt for weeks. And then other things will just be like, oh, that's a funny meme. What can we do with that? And then like later that day, it'll be up on Instagram. So we try to have a little bit of a balance between thinking things out, 3 months down the road, and then also having some space to just respond to something in the moment. But I would say like, CD Baby does that well. It has been a personal like learning curve or challenge for me to get more organized in that way, because for so long it was like I said, just CD Baby content was sort of synonymous with whatever I wanted it to be. And I trusted myself to be productive and to be constantly putting stuff out, but I didn't need to lean on anyone else. There almost didn't need to be a schedule because it was all on my shoulders. And now CD Baby has grown so dramatically. We started with a marketing department of 3, and I think we have, 19 people on our team now, something like that, just in marketing. So, we have to keep each other accountable to timelines a little bit more. So when I said I wasn't good at time blocking in my own life, I'm struggling to get good at that quickly for work.
Yeah. And I imagine there's a great deal of collaboration that has to happen, because you may have a great idea for today's content, but 3 other people may have a similar idea, and trying to space all that out, and that's got to be a challenge.
Yeah, and to prioritize it too, because like just because, let's say four of us have different ideas, like you're saying, maybe three of them are really good and worth doing, but we only have so much bandwidth, so we can tackle one, this month or whatever, or this week. So like, even just to have a lot more consideration for what is the top priority is something that's in some way it's common sense, but also is sort of a new process for me since it's collaborative by its very nature. With before, whatever I prioritized is what captured my interest the most that day.
Talking about marketing and kind of bringing this to a personal level to my listeners, one of the tools that CD Baby brings to the table is show.co. And I think you've been pretty involved with sort of marketing and outreach for that brand.
Yeah.
Can you talk about a little bit about show.co and what that does for a musician?
Yeah. So show.co is a suite of music marketing tools that we actually acquired maybe 5 years ago at this point. And it was basically this tool that I think that the thing that was getting the most headlines at the time was the Spotify pre-save. And so that is one of the many things that you can do with it. You run a Spotify pre-save, and all these labels were using it. Maroon 5, Tove Lo, not that they're labels, but artists on labels of that stature. And then the real compelling story was Oasis, the Brit rock band. They had kind of been dormant for quite a long time, but they knew they had a huge audience out there, and they wanted to activate that audience to like get onto Spotify, start following and listening to their music there. And so they started using show.co, or their label did, and they had something like 92 or 93% conversion rates, which is,
insane,
beyond a miracle in the marketing world. Yeah. And so, they're a famous artist, so in some way they're always going to be an outlier, but there is something about show.co as a tool that makes it a very intuitive and sort of intuitive for the artist to create the campaigns. It forces the artist to be succinct in the way they phrase their offer. And then also, unlike a lot of smart link tools that do pre-saves, where, like your fan clicks pre-save, woohoo, now they get the pre-save on Friday or whatever, or get the song on Friday. There's not a whole lot of reason for a fan to do that. There's no shortage of, ways for them to remember you have music out. And so really that's a pre-save is something where they're entirely doing you a favor for not much benefit. And most other pre-save tools kind of end there. You ask them to do you a favor, they do you a favor, end of story. But with show.co, the pre-save is just this kind of intermediary gateway. And beyond that is something else that you incentivize your fans to do. It could be a contest. It could be unlocking an unlisted YouTube video, something like that, where maybe you send them to a private SoundCloud thing that has the demo of the song you're about to release, just anything like that, where it's more about the experience. And so I really appreciate that about show.co as well. I try to wrap this all up by saying it can do a lot more than Spotify pre-saves. We make it available to CD Baby account holders for free. If people go right to show.co to use it, and labels and stuff, they have to pay. But if you create a CD Baby account, and you don't even have to end up using us for distribution, hint, hint, you can create a CD Baby account, and then there'll be a link in there to initiate a free show.co account.
Yeah, and I've been a CD Baby artist for a while, and I've used show.co for pre-saves, and it is a very simple interface and worked really well. What are some of the? Can you give us a couple of examples that you've seen work well for sort of giveaways that people have run in exchange for pre-saves? What you mentioned, like demos. What can you think of any specific examples that people have used, or maybe you've used that have worked well?
Well, so I can think of a few examples. I'll start with Oasis. What they were doing, it wasn't for a pre-save because they weren't making new music. It was to get people to follow them on Spotify or to just go and consume music there. And they were doing a box set giveaway, and they were probably doing more than one. It might have been, I can't remember exactly. It might have been like, we've got 20 box sets and we'll autograph them, something like that. That was a great giveaway. for my friend Kevin, who co-hosts the podcast with me that we have. He has one of my favorite examples. His band, they're called Small Town Poets. And at some point in the late 90s, they were touring and they had this medley of, I think they were songs from the 70s that they were playing. And something about them performing it at this one place got them kicked off stage. Like the lights went out, the club booker or manager or whatever came up and like literally like almost had the hook or something and just quickly got them off stage. He was pissed. So he had a recording of that he put on SoundCloud as, an unlisted or private thing. And his headline was, "Hear the song that got us kicked off stage." And I can't remember what his response was, but it's something he's been able to use not just for Small Time Poets fans to engage with, because that's a headline that he puts it out every once in a while on Twitter or, wherever. And just random people that come across it are like, I wonder what was so awful or offensive or whatever, And so then you go and you hear the song, and I think he has a description, the SoundCloud description says more of the story and the details, but I always like that one. And then the campaign that I did for my own music that worked the best was there was this song I was putting out where the music video, which, oh my God, this is terrible to admit, but I never finished editing it. But I had edited a teaser reel for it. And the video consists of me just getting slapped a bunch. It's like, I don't know if people know that LCD sound system video, or that was kind of the inspiration for it, but we took it in a slightly different direction. But so my headline was like, what did I say? Pre-save and see me get slapped 20 times or something like that. And so it unlocked the teaser video, and some 2 years later, eventually I'll get around to actually putting the video out.
Interesting. Yeah. The expression these days is, "This song slaps."
Yeah, right. Literally.
Okay. Interesting. All right, great. Now Show.co just, it does a lot more. It also helps you run ad campaigns on websites and several other things, right?
Yeah. So on the free side of things, there's a campaign type called social unlock. And that's really anything where you want your follower, your fan, to take an action, and then they unlock some content. And so the action they could take to unlock the content or the contest could be a Spotify pre-save, Spotify save, a Spotify follow, something called stream to unlock, where once they listen to at least 30 seconds of your song on Spotify, that qualifies them to go on to the content that you're offering. There's a few other things in that category, but then there's also a YouTube premiere campaign type, which is basically just, it's a fancy page to embed a video, but it looks really nice. It gets rid of the YouTube clutter. There's no other recommended videos. And then you can put up these things called conversion cards as the video plays that can, boost your following on Twitter, Facebook, things like that. You can link to a web store, to Spotify, whatever. There's a similar kind of page for SoundCloud players where it gets rid of the clutter. And then, on the paid side of it, there's a tool called Ad Builder, which lets you run ads for music on premier music websites, Pitchfork, Billboard, MTV.com, a bunch of places like that. And there's a really cool ad type called, what are we calling them? Interactive ads. And basically you just put in a YouTube link or a Spotify link to a song, and the ad itself is the playable media. So a lot of times the way that they appear, let's say you're on Pitchfork and that ad comes up, it actually looks to some degree like it's editorial content because it's a video. So there's a sort of sneaky way of you kind of like making it look like your music's on Pitchfork from an editorial standpoint. If someone clicks the video, it's a monetized play, first of all. So you're probably not going to make back what you're spending, but at least it's getting you some return. And then if they enjoy what they are watching right there on the site, which is cool, they don't have to leave the site to go and, check out the ad. But if they do want to, you can still put a call to action there that can link them to wherever you want, web store, your own website, Spotify, whatever.
Okay. Now, in that case, you're simply using that ad for anybody that's on Pitchfork, which certainly covers a diverse amount of music, there isn't any way to further target it like Facebook ads. Like I am looking specifically for, 25 to 35-year-olds in a particular area. It's just Pitchfork listeners that are going to see it.
There are more specific ways you can target. So you can do, you can narrow it, but not nearly to the same degree as Facebook. But you've got geographic options. You have there's sort of 3 different easy bucket kind of tiers of websites. So one is like the premier music sites, and obviously for that you're going to pay more for less impressions, and that would be the Pitchforks of the world. And then they're sort of designated by genres, so you can target blogs of various, I don't know what you call the tiers, various notoriety or whatever, various levels of influence based on genre and a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, it's not as the targeting features aren't as robust as Facebook, but to some degree that's by design, because we wanted this to be a thing that's reaching, kind of an easy button where you're at least reaching music fans, and you don't have to do a bunch of work to segment them out that way.
Yeah. Facebook Ad Manager is kind of intimidating the first time you go in there.
Yeah.
So,
and, or the 1,000th time you've been in there, since they keep moving things around.
Very true. Very, very true. You mentioned the CD Baby conference, and I've been to one of those, but you've been kind of integral in planning. How many have you had now?
I'm forgetting because of the pandemic, but let's see, we were in Chicago twice, Nashville twice, and Austin. So we had five in person, and then COVID hit. We are doing one this summer that's virtual. It's going to be kind of a sort of a stripped down thing, but still 3 days. We'll try to make it very high impact, but we know people have screen burnout for sure. So
now that's, I think I saw an ad for that. That's free, isn't it?
It is free. Yep. And if you go to, what's our website? DIYmusicianconference.com or DIYmusiciancon.com. There should be information about it. You just have to RSVP, but it's totally free.
Yeah, I will make sure I include a link in the show notes. As I mentioned, I went to the one in Nashville in 2018, and I took notes. I have a 30-page hyperlinked PDF of carefully, meticulously cleaned up and organized notes from all the sessions I attended. And,
oh my God. You did your own? Wow.
I did. And then I wound up using that as a giveaway for email addresses. So
you're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah.
Did you say you were a speaker there as well?
No, but I would love to one day. That would be awesome.
I know we are looking, this might be something that's saved for the in-person event in 2022, but I know we're going to do a podcast, like a podcast room, a podcast discussion, something like that. So,
okay. All right. Well, keep me in mind. That would be awesome. What goes into, I would think my listeners are primarily producers and DJs, but planning any sort of a major event, there's, I think, probably some commonality. What goes into planning a major conference like this? What are some of the considerations, and what are you guys looking at, and how far out do you start planning?
Yeah. So thankfully, a couple other people on our team do the legwork that is based around like, reserving the site and really worrying about hotel blocks, because that is one concern, that most conference centers are attached to hotels, and in order for you to sell this hotel on your event and that it's worth it, they want to know a certain amount of your attendees are going to stay at that hotel. So, the negotiations between how much rooms cost, how many people from your conference you can reasonably expect to reserve those rooms is pretty important. And then one of the weird things we run into is we're not a doctor's conference or a lawyer's conference. We're a DIY musician conference. So by the nature of it, these aren't people who have a ton of extra income. So we have to be extra, jump through some hoops to make sure rooms can stay affordable. And it's not like, hey, come to this cheap conference, because we make it affordable. I forget what tickets are. They might be $50 early bird and maybe $150 at the most. So even the tickets for 3 days of events are very affordable, but the rooms might otherwise be $400 unless we did a bunch of work to make them affordable. So that's the first thing. And then once you got the place, it's just a matter of balancing the content, making sure it's all, good, actionable stuff. We have to do a little bit of making sure speakers aren't totally there for the hard sell on their own courses, because, there's a lot of music industry, music marketing experts out there. And when they speak, they want you to sign up for their thing. And that's fine to an extent, but we have to try to make sure it's like, hey, keep that to the last minute and a half, and just make the session something that could live on its own. And if someone never pursued you onto your course you're selling, they can walk away getting some value from this. So that's another thing. And then, trying to have a diverse representation in terms of gender and racial diversity, trying to have some international presence as well, which thankfully CD Baby has a pretty huge international team at this point with offices all over the world. So we can kind of lean on some of those folks to find good speakers and people who are willing to travel for that stuff too. So, and then the last thing I'll say is you got to have good parties. So you need some offsite places where, beer is cheap and there's good music.
Yeah, that certainly is a big draw. Do you have any favorite memories from any of the recent conferences?
I do, and maybe this is a weird memory because it didn't happen at the conference, but I met some people who were attending. I think it was the Saturday of a 3-day conference. So it was the sort of the middle day. Met all these people who were already friends, and they had decided that they were going to form this little group and then go to a bunch of different sessions and all take notes, come back at the end of the night and share what they'd all learned so they could kind of feel like they attended all the sessions. And I forget when it might've been after, sort of at the end of the educational part of the day around 5, and they told me about this meeting and they invited me. And so I went maybe 8:00 at night, and I ended up staying there till 2 a.m. It was just this great small group of people that were just so kind, super motivated. They had good stuff to share from the sessions, but they also just had good tips from their own lives and what they were doing with their music. And I loved that. And it was that memory is what that conference is about for me. It's we want to facilitate a meeting of artists who can do that, not just that weekend, but stay in touch and help each other for the rest of their lives. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I know. I'm still following a bunch of people and interact with people from 2018 on social media that, made some remarkable friends while I was there. And it was a really, really cool event. I'm looking forward to coming back another time.
Nice. That's awesome.
So yeah, I'm definitely going to check out the online one this year. I don't think I'm quite zoomed out yet. So.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. How did you manage that?
Well, being a music producer, I stare at a screen all day anyway. So last year wasn't that different.
Right.
So sad, but true. Tell me, so CD Baby I think you guys have been around longer than anybody else. You guys kind of started the industry of do-it-yourself releases, and I think you've been around for 20, 25 years now. Is that right?
It's since 98. So what would that be? 23 years at this point?
23 years. Yeah. All right. So 25 will have to be a big conference.
Oh, yeah.
What would you say when somebody is looking at different distributors? What is the sales pitch that you give for CD Baby? Why should people come to CD Baby as opposed to any of the dozens of other ones that are out there?
Well, I actually listened to your interview with Pony a few episodes ago, and I liked his description of when he was comparing CD Baby and Sound Drop, and how he described Sound Drop as the casual taco cart or something like that.
And you're the steak restaurant.
And we're the steakhouse, and so you will pay a little bit more. And the good news is that's a one-time fee, and then we will never again ask you for an annual fee. So your music is guaranteed to stay up for as long as there is an internet, until the sun expands or the heat death of the universe or whatever. Your music will be out there, because a lot of musicians, I think they fall for the cheap option, the cheap competitors, thinking that the lower price is the deciding factor. And then a couple things will happen. One, they can get in there and realize that that's not really a fair assessment of what it costs, because if they really want everything that CD Baby would have just gave them all for that one-time fee. With a competitor, they're getting nickel and dime for everything, and they're paying just as much or more, with the added stress of the annual fees or the renewal fees, or some companies will do like per delivery fees, like, oh, hey, we partner with this new thing called Triller or TikTok or whatever. You want your music there, you got to pay extra. So our pricing model gets rid of all that worry. One-time fee, and then beyond that, we only ever make money when you do. And the fact that we also take a cut of kind of back-end revenue, I think a lot of times is kind of used against us. But I actually think it's one of our biggest I don't know, selling point's the right word, but it basically means our incentives are completely aligned. When you are successful, we're successful. And that means we want to get your music into every opportunity, be fully monetized on every platform, not just now, but anytime there's a new platform. We want it there for free. And it's not just about like delivering your latest single to Spotify in time for this, one drop that everyone's going to forget about a week later because you're going to be on to the next track or whatever. Our catalog goes back 23 years and all of it matters to us. We're trying to fully monetize the 23-year-old releases the same way we are something that came out last year. So that's another thing. We've had a long history of being just, reachable, artist friendly, happy to meet up, have conversations about other aspects of music making that aren't, specifically about distribution. But Kevin and I go live on Facebook and Instagram a lot for Q&As. So we just want to be accessible and make sure that people know that the folks that work at CD Baby are, lots of them are musicians. Almost all of them are artists in some way. So they all kind of get the life and what it's like to put yourself out there and just treat the music that people are putting out like it matters, because it does. And we know that for the artists, it's, something that matters a great deal. So
yeah,
that wasn't a succinct elevator pitch, but that's my case for CD Baby.
That was great. And I have had a fantastic experience with CD Baby thus far. And I think I've been releasing music with you guys since, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now.
Oh,
6
cool.
years maybe.
Nice. Thanks.
So I've enjoyed it. I will say, and particularly since I've got an audience full of producers and DJs, I think the one distribution platform that I feel like you guys are missing, and I'm curious why it hasn't been added, is Beatport, which is huge for DJs and producers. So
I'll preempt this by saying I don't know all the technical reasons. This is a decision that, like, literally every time I go live on Facebook, someone pops up and says, hey, when are you going to partner with Beatport? And as far as I understand it, when we've talked to our digital operations team, which is the team that's responsible for gathering up the files and the metadata, checking and inspecting it all, and then sending it on to the DSPs and music platforms, we've had this issue where we want to work with companies that'll take our whole catalog, and that is just such a niche one that there ends up being, and again, sorry for the sort of vague, ignorant answer, but I'm not sure what the snags are, but there's some reason why. I don't know if it's that there's sort of leveraging better deals for our artists or something like that, but there's a reason why the people who negotiate that stuff want to work with companies who will take everything. Mm-hmm. And and so I don't know what the state of that is for future discussions. It comes up so often that I know we're constantly vetting that stance, if you know what I mean. It's always discussed in our prioritization meetings quarterly, so Beatport's still really important. So can I turn this into an interview of you and ask you, why is it so important? What does your community get from that platform they can't get elsewhere?
So for electronic musicians and DJs and producers, Beatport and charting on Beatport is kind of almost a holy grail. If you can get a release that charts on Beatport, that's a major feather in your cap, and that's where a lot of DJs go to download the hottest, latest tracks. And so if you're not on Beatport, that's one of the go-to places that people go for music that's played out in clubs and festivals. Mm-hmm. So it's just a major point of visibility for electronic musicians.
Right. Yeah, that's okay. That confirms my suspicion. Okay.
Yeah. And I can also understand if it is, as you were kind of describing, if it is an issue of not accepting the whole catalog. CD Baby has 20 plus years of a very diverse group of do-it-yourself musicians. I can kind of understand if that's the hurdle, Beatport not wanting to flood their directories and their databases with, folk music and all, country music and a lot of other things, which I guess might clutter the searches perhaps for people looking for specific types of music. But I'm just speculating.
Yeah, and it would be, we have something like 700 genres in our catalog. So it'd be literally stuff from all over the world. I think your average Beatport user would be like, what the fuck?
Where's this coming from? I was looking for tribal techno, and now I got this crazy stuff. All right. Well, it'd be interesting to see what happens. So what would you say is, two-part question. What would you say is next for CD Baby? What are you guys working on moving forward? And what's next for your personal music career?
Yeah. So with CD Baby, the boring answer is we're going through a big database migration right now. Which is boring for all the listeners, but super exciting for us because we have 23 years of accounting, super detailed accounting information, metadata about the music. And we're just upgrading our system so we can do more with it. And once that is done, it's on our list to sort of finalize the work on things like revenue splits, more robust credits. We can support different producer, featured artists to some degree, but I know there's a lot more that we can do in that area. So those are sort of the little technical things that we'd like to tackle first. And then big picture, we haven't rolled this out really officially. So hopefully I'm not spilling the beans on anything, but we have always had a creator services team, kind of an A&R label services department for, well, I don't know about always, but for about 11 or 12 years probably. And they handle things like editorial pitching and playlist pitching with DSPs, even things like more A&R type stuff like advances and helping with more robust physical distribution rollouts and fulfillment, that kind of stuff, down to like just getting a billboard in Times Square, like all these kinds of things that big artists do, we have done, but we've been a little bit quiet about it, except to that kind of tier of artist and manager, because we can't sort of responsibly promise that to our whole user base because we have 1 million artists. But what we're trying to do is find the language to basically say, we have these things, we've always have them, we do it really well, and here's why that's good for you, the average CD Baby artist, even if you don't qualify for them yet. And the answer is because you don't need a label. We don't want anyone to ever need a label. And if they work, hard enough and the music's good enough and they grow their career to a place where they reasonably start looking around and say, what are my options? We want one of their options and we want the one they pick to be like, hey, I'm going to stay here because CD Baby now I can kind of unlock all these things that I would ever want to leave for. So, and when they do that, they obviously retain their rights. They continue to earn the lion's share of whatever their music is generating. And so the program that we're calling it is Stages. So basically the rollout of that and just creating some public awareness that we have that. And there's different tiers, once you get to 20,000 monthly listeners on Spotify, it's like, we can do these things for you. Once you get to 200, 1,000, and we can do these things. And those are only, they're not strict mile markers. It's just more like, that's our quick shorthand way of saying, like, are you around this level in your career? Because we also work with people who have no activity on Spotify, but kill it on Pandora and make like literally $1 million a year from Pandora. So, sorry, I'm rambling now, but
no, that's good.
That make sense?
I've never heard. Yeah, it does. So you've got this sort of behind the scenes program that has been running, but you're trying to figure out how to begin marketing that as a benefit to CD Baby developing artists. As, hey, here's here's something that's available to you once your career develops to a certain point.
Yeah, and it's kind of a touchy thing to explain. Probably not to your audience, but like if we just sent an email to a million artists, we'd have to be careful about it because it truly is a benefit. But we also know that when we say, "Hey, we offer this stuff, but not to you yet," that can seem sort of elitist and or what would you call it? It's just some sort of caste system. All of a sudden, when CD Baby's like founding ethos was every artist matters, every genre matters. There's nothing too niche, and like if literally you only ever have 3 fans in your life, your music is just as important and valid, at least to those 3 people as someone who's selling millions. And as someone who likes poetry and folk music, I am 100% behind that ethos. They're just such life-changing, beautiful music being made that doesn't have mass appeal. So given that that's how CD Baby started and why it started, and the belief that no matter how niche you are and how small your fan base, you deserve to be treated with respect, you deserve to have access to the tools and monetization and all this stuff, like it is a little weird to say like, oh, and then there's this one thing you can't quite have yet. Or so, all that to say, we're still trying to figure out how to make it sound convincingly aspirational, because it is.
Yeah. That I can see that, and I can see how it would be a little bit delicate. So, and the second part of the question was, what's next for you? I saw in your bio you were talking about how your shows are like, I believe, comets, occasionally going past, but life-changing when you do, So when is the next comet passing by, and what are you working on?
Oh, actually, they're getting less rare now. I have, let's see, I'm playing Maine. The state of Maine is turning, well, actually it turned 200 last year, but since the pandemic was in full force, they delayed the bicentennial parade. So there's a big 200-year celebration parade that I'm playing, which will be exciting. And then there's a kind of a concert in the park series happening in the city I live in that I'll be doing in late August. And then I'm actually playing a house show at a friend's just in his backyard, which I'm excited for. There are 3 very different kinds of shows. One is a tiny crowd in a backyard playing a short set of all my original stuff. I love that. And then the parade one will be kind of random passersby who definitely aren't there for me, but so that might do some more covers for that one. And then the concert in the park will be kind of a mix of those 2 things. But so I'm excited for that. And then I'm putting out an album in September. I've been doing a couple lead up singles so far. I think one more single next month, and then lots of video stuff. I'm creating a kind of a behind the scenes experience to capture leads, and be able to do that. I don't know if you've talked about marketing funnels much on your podcast, but kind of build one of those marketing funnels that starts with video introductions on Instagram and Facebook, and leading down to getting their email, providing a cool behind the scenes thing with all this video and all sorts of stuff. And then, at the end of that, hopefully they walk home with some merch.
Okay, fantastic. Well, give me a couple, where's the best place for people to find information about your new upcoming release? And obviously we know the cdbaby.com website.
Yeah. I guess for me, chrisrobley.com. It's ROBLEY. And then, I think Instagram's probably my favorite social place to be right now. So, and that's just at Chris Robley as well.
Okay. Well, I will make sure to include links to both. And again, I really appreciate your time today.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much. This was fun.
This episode was recorded before the CD Baby Virtual DIY Conference. So if you'd like to hear a concise summary of my most important takeaways from the 3-day event, check out episode 82. As always, I'll have a lot of links for you over on the show notes page at producerlifepodcast.com, and this was episode 83. Also, in 2 weeks, we have the other host of the CD Baby DIY podcast, Kevin Bruner. So make sure you hit subscribe because Kevin offers some great ideas throughout that episode. Oh, last but not least, a big shout out to Neo the 115 over on iTunes, who says this podcast is informative. This is an excellent podcast. I love how it goes into depth on all kinds of topics about the music industry. Highly recommended. Thank you so much for taking the time to do that, Neo. If you're enjoying the podcast, please leave a rating and review wherever you're listening, because I'd love to feature your review in a future episode. Until next time, this is the House Ninja reminding you to be somebody's hero today.